Hello and welcome to KnightHunter Books. This is our August wrap-up and unusually you've read more books than I have.
I know! This is definitely a first for the channel. So I've had a bit of a disappointing reading month, and every single one of the books that I am wrapping up today I actually started or was reading during the Booktubeathon. So these have been books that have been in progress for a while. So I've finished some books, which is, you know, always
Progress.
Good. Yeah. I maybe should have DNF'd at least one of them.
Does that mean I read more total pages in August than you did?
Possibly. Yeah, well, they're quite short too. So the first book I'm going to talk about, which is probably the one I have the most to say, is Neverending Story by Ende, which I read because I really liked the children's film. And it's got really good reviews on like Goodreads and stuff, but no, I did not like this. This was like 2, maybe 3 to push stars. It is a quest story and it is relatively close to the film for the first half, and then this diverges into, I think, Neverending Story 2, which was less well received. The book is absolutely full of ideas, weird little quirky fantasy worlds and characters. I just never really felt like there was enough plot holding it all together, and I think that's something I struggle with in books anyway. However, the first bit of the book I thought was okay. It did what it was trying to do reasonably well, and I could imagine, you know, kids liking it. And then you reach a climax in the book, about in the middle, which is fantastic, and actually I think it's done really well. One of the ideas this book explores is kind of books within books and kind of meta-fiction and all that kind of stuff, and that was kind of mind-boggling and really cool. So we had a really strong idea there, but then you start to follow a different character for the second half of the book, a character who is not very likeable and doesn't really have much of a purpose, and I just didn't really enjoy being alongside him in his adventure. There was definitely kind of morals the author was trying to tell, but I felt like it took way too long to tell them, and then they were kind of just rushed at the very end. And obviously all of that was wrong, and what you should do is this, but without actually demonstrating it. Yeah. So this feels like a book that should have been about friendship between 2 boys, but I can't actually think of anything they did which shows friendship. I mean, occasionally, you know, they nearly die for each other and stuff, but it's like, why do they care about each other? What's the basis of that? You know, they don't have conversations, or it's all a bit surface.
In our last video, sort of relationships we'd like to see more of in fiction, I'll put the link below, we said that you quite often see male comrades in arms, but you don't see convincing friendships, and it would be nice if they'd explored that a bit more.
And there are a lot of like, this looks short, but it's nearly 400 pages, so he did have the room to explore those things. I just feel like he explored the things I wasn't interested in.
My first book is the Delirium Brief by Stross, which is the 8th book in the Laundry Files sequence. I won't go into too much detail about this book. The series itself is set in a world where certain operations in mathematics echo through the dimensions and run the risk of attracting attention, from small gribbly things that will just eat one brain to things that could eat the whole of humanity. As the book has progressed, the amount of computing power in the world has increased so dramatically that there's more and more of this mathematics going on, so the world is changing and becoming more flexible. So effectively the power level in the series and the level of threat goes up. The point of view of the first few books is a character called Bob Howard, who starts out as an IT geek trying to write a new graphics driver, which nearly summons something that could have destroyed most of Wolverhampton. At that point he gets an offer he is not allowed to refuse. He is recruited to work for the laundry, a branch of the Special Operations Executive. The rest of the intelligence community don't know they exist. and they deal with threats that go bump in the night. They've started to go bump in the daytime too.
And I've read one novella that's part of this series, and I have to say he did ruin unicorns for me. These gribbly things are scary and kind of twist on tropes that exist.
Yes.
One of the other books I finished in August is The Beasts of No Nation by Uzodinma Iweala. This one is actually very short. It follows a child soldier in an African country. Kind of follows his story from recruitment all the way to the end of his story as it connects to the war. This book I don't think is written by someone who's actually been in this situation, whereas other books I've read by child soldiers have actually been more autobiographical. But this is written by someone who lives in the Congo. This book has a lot of good reviews, so it probably is a kind of good example of what it's trying to do. It was deeply uncomfortable to read. It does have quite a lot of violence and scenes of a sexual nature, as you'd kind of expect. But this book didn't affect me, or I didn't feel for the character. I didn't really build up any anticipation with this story, so I feel like they're the kind of the basics that this type of book should be able to get from me.
Yeah.
And it didn't, so, you know, maybe I was in the wrong mood to read it or read it over too long, but that means I can't rightfully rate this particularly highly, even though it is probably an important book. It's written very much in the voice of the child, so that means there's a kind of very distinctive style of, you know, not using proper punctuation and using very simplistic words and things like that.
There's probably a limit on what they understand as well.
That was more the thing that got to me, is, yeah, so that to a certain extent should help the story, but I think I just wanted to know a bit more of what was actually going on, and actually as a very young child, he didn't really know what was going on. He was just kind of being bounced from violence to violence.
Point the gun in that direction, they're the bad guys. Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know if I might have enjoyed this more with that kind of extra, maybe narrator view or a second character or something like that. I don't feel like this book quite did what it was trying to do.
Or what you hoped it would.
Yeah. So it's good, but not great. There is a book I read last year which was from the point of view of a child soldier in Cambodia, and that one I thought was actually much better. That one did, you know, affect me emotionally. Never Fall Down by Patricia McCormick. I'll put the details down below. So that one I'd recommend over this one. My
second book is My Real Children by Jo Walton. Jo Walton is quite well known for the Philosopher King series and the Halfpenny series, and among others. So this is a standalone. You follow a woman down two different timelines, neither of which is ours, which becomes more apparent as she gets closer to the present. I struggled with the start of this book because the first 50 pages are in a world very parallel to our 40s, and her life is unrelentingly grim. She's not my favourite thing to read, honestly. You might like it. And while I quite appreciate the sort of the interweaving between the worlds, and there's sort of some science fiction elements to that, sort of exploring different timelines, which is quite interesting. All told, just didn't quite get there for me. I think, basically, I like books that are, you know, the literary equivalent of uppers. This is a downer. And then the final book I read in August is Bad Science and the Truth About Healthy Eating by Anthony Warner, or The Angry Chef, which is a non-fiction book, as you might have been able to tell from the title, and it really does what it says on the tin. I rated this 4 stars, I really enjoyed it. I found it, well, a big bonus for a non-fiction for me. It is a book that I read reasonably quickly. It was written in a very colloquial way. There are a few really interesting kind of anecdotes or kind of stories from history that he kind of interweaves into this, and quite a lot of humour. The main downside I think I hit was just it's a little repetitive. Are they effectively collected blog posts? They're not, but that's what the author is known for, so I wonder if that's just a habit
thing, or it might work better if you know, read a chapter, wait a week. He definitely had a point to make, and he kept making that point, even though I was probably sold before I opened the book. But this is definitely one which, you know, I might try and subtly push on family members, because I think it's a really important point to make. One of the central points this book is trying to get across is that there's a lot of healthy eating ideas out there that seem harmless, but there's kind of a thin end of the wedge problem going on where actually they can have really serious repercussions. I definitely recommend it for someone who doesn't know much about it and the title has piqued their interest. But I think by the fact that I'd already heard quite a bit of it before and I don't know that much about the topic, I'd say this is a kind of first dive into the topic rather than for someone who already knows quite a lot.
That's it for this month. Hopefully next month we'll read slightly more books.
I think that's doubtful. I'm trying to read an 800-page book this month, which...
You've read any of these or are interested in reading them, do comment below. Be nice to have a conversation about them. Thank you for watching. See you again soon.